Hello dear students, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy daily newspaper analysis. Today is 21st July 2024 Sunday and we have some important news articles for the discussion today. So without any further delay, let's get into this discussion and we will try and analyze all those important news articles in an exam relevant manner. Right. So before discussing them, we'll try to solve yesterday given practice question. You all knew that every day we are practicing one objective question for the prelims examination. So today also have a one important question for the discussion. The question is, consider the following statements with respect to the tuberculosis disease. So we all knew that it is caused by a bacteria, right? So previously also we have discussed so many times about the tuberculosis disease, right? So first option, if you look at the first option, it says tuberculosis is a bacterial infection and caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It is absolutely correct. There is no doubt about that, because it is caused by a bacteria, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And the second option, not all people who become infected with the TB will develop symptoms. Yes, it is also absolutely true. When people are getting infected with the tuberculosis disease, not all people generally show the symptoms for this disease. Only few people would show the symptoms and other people would not show the symptoms. So therefore this statement is also absolutely correct. And if you look at the third statement, the disease affects only the lungs and not other parts of the body. However, this statement is clearly an incorrect statement. It is true that tuberculosis bacteria would infect lungs, but there is no guarantee that tuberculosis disease would not infect other body parts of human beings. So therefore third statement is absolutely incorrect statement, but on the other hand, statement 1 and statement 2 are correct statement. So the correct answer for this question is option B. Option B, 1 and 2 are correct answers for this question. So you can also go through the explanation of tuberculosis. So as I have already told you that it is a bacterial infection and it is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So Mycobacterium tuberculosis actually causes this particular disease. Okay, so not all people who are infected with this particular TB disease will generally show the symptoms. So in fact, those who do not become ill are referred to as having a latent TB. So those individuals, even though they are infected with the tuberculosis but they don't show the symptoms, and such TB patients are known as latent TB patients. And in fact, it cannot spread the infection to others. Whenever latent TB getting infected by any individual is infected with this latent TB, or the TB does not show any symptoms, then there is a probability that it cannot spread to other people. So while those who become ill with active TB disease, so those who are infected with the TB and they fell ill because of this particular disease, so that those patients are known as active TB patients, right? So they have symptoms like coughing and sometimes sputum or blood through coughing, chest pains, weaknesses, weight loss, fever and night swallows. So these are some of the symptoms that they generally show, so whenever they get infected with the active TB disease, right? So the disease usually affects the lungs, but in serious cases it can also infect other body parts in the human beings, right? So if not treated properly, it could lead to the death or mortality of an individual. So therefore TB is one of the most dangerous disease, so that requires adequate care and attention and government interventions also in terms of providing better healthcare, better diagnosis and medication, everything. But with respect to TB, the antimicrobial resistance is one of the most crucial problem, right? So all these challenges have to be dealt with in order to cure the TB disease or to prevent the TB disease infection. And today also I have one prelims practice question, so try to answer this question in the comment section. And this is also one of the very important question. This is important because this question is with respect to Enforcement Directorate, and Enforcement Directorate is very often in news in recent times, and therefore it is very important for you to understand the basic things with respect to the Enforcement Directorate. The first statement, Enforcement Directorate is a statutory body mandated with the investigation of offences of of money laundering and violation of foreign exchange laws. This is the first statement. Second statement says it is an agency under the Union Ministry of Home Affairs. Third statement, the Enforcement Directorate does have the power to take action on its own. So that is also known as suo motu action. So therefore, identify the correct answers from the given statements and try to answer this question in the comment section. So we all knew that yesterday I have given one mains practice question, the descriptive question on strategic autonomy. The question is India's policy of strategic autonomy during this Russia-Ukraine war. So India shows that its policy was a strategic autonomy. So however, this particular policy is very often criticized by the West, particularly US. However, even though the strategic autonomy is being criticized by the West, India's national interests are best served by the policy of strategic autonomy in a multipolar world order. So discuss. This was the question that I have given to you yesterday, and I have also mentioned that this is very important for your paper 2 international relations section. So when you look at the approach, so how we can actually structure this answer. So approach and the structure of the answer is very important, right? So I've told you that first you have to write the strategic autonomy. So you just write the definition of strategic autonomy, and recent criticism from the US on the policy of strategic autonomy. So you can also mention that after writing introduction, you can briefly mention the criticism of the policy of strategic autonomy, and then you can write how strategic autonomy would best serve India's interests, and you have to briefly write the challenges for India in its policy of strategic autonomy. How can India maintain its policy of strategic autonomy, particularly in a multipolar world order where there are complex geopolitical landscapes, and then you have to conclude this answer by giving in a good way forward. So that is how you have to structure this answer. And if you look at the answer, as I have already told you, first define a strategic autonomy. Now what does strategic autonomy actually means? So strategic autonomy is a foreign policy choice India follows right from the independence, right? So a strategic autonomy actually means making decisions, and these decisions would best serve India's national interest, India's national priorities, that would be free from the external pressure. So whatever decisions India would take, so those decisions would be based on our own merit rather than the pressure or influence from the other countries, and that is what is strategic autonomy that India follows right from the independence. And in fact, it also involves having the conviction, will and resources to take autonomous decisions. We take autonomous decisions in our foreign policy choices. So that's how we are balancing the East and the West. So that's how we are balancing the US and Russia, maintaining friendly ties with both of these countries, and that's the essence of India's strategic autonomy. So I hope you have understood what is this strategic autonomy actually means. So India following this strategic autonomy right from the India's independence. Okay, so in fact the policy of strategic autonomy is actually reflected in some of India's foreign policy choices, such as non-alignment movement. So we have followed the policy, the approach of non-alignment during the Cold War times, where there was two centers of power. The world was divided into two poles, the West and the East, USSR and US. So at that point of time, we followed the policy of non-alignment, and then non-alignment to multi-alignment, and multi-alignment and multi-directional foreign policies are very closely aligned with the India's policy of strategic autonomy. So therefore we can say that India has been following the policy of strategic autonomy right from India's independence. So after that, we need to talk about the recent Ukraine war and how India following the policy of strategic autonomy. And as per the policy of strategic autonomy, the neutrality would be the best option for India, because all the Western countries are supporting Ukraine, but on the other hand, India not openly criticized Russia for its actions on Ukraine. So therefore we can say that India following the policy of neutrality. and this is a very closely aligned with India's policy of strategic autonomy. So India maintained its strategic partnership with Russia. Yes, we always have friendly ties with Russia, and these ties are historical ties, and we also have strategic ties with Russia. So therefore India always maintained a strategic partnership with Russia, and in recent times, during especially after the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, so we have further expanded our energy cooperation. So we have been importing a huge quantities of oil into India, right? So in fact India also refused to condemn the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So that would cause some sort of a friction with India's relations with the West, especially the US and its allies. So therefore during the Ukraine war, India's policy was a neutrality. So we have adopted a neutral stance, and that is very close to the policy of strategic autonomy. So therefore India's neutrality during the Russia-Ukraine war was criticized by US and its allies. For example, US Ambassador Gazzetti, so he also made comments on India's policy of strategic autonomy. What were his comments? His comments, he actually questioned India's ability to exercise strategic autonomy during crisis. So it would be very difficult to exercise a policy like strategic autonomy during crisis times, and in fact he also suggested that it becomes meaningless during such times. The policy of strategic autonomy would be meaningless in crisis times. So India should take a clear stand with respect to such crises rather than adopting the policy of strategic autonomy, and that is what the US criticism of India's strategic autonomy. Now how would this policy of strategic autonomy would actually benefit India? Because so when we have adopted the policy of strategic autonomy, so it provides us multiple options. So we have a multiple options to engage. So therefore we can engage with different global power centers. For example, now as of now, if you look at India's foreign policy, India's diplomatic efforts, we have been engaging with the major global powers. We have been engaging with Russia, and we have been engaging with US, West. So therefore it is generally not possible for all the countries across the world to engage with different countries who have a different interests. But with respect to India's case, so we have been following the policy of strategic autonomy, and we have been engaging with major global power centers, like we have been engaging with US and European Union, Russia, China. So therefore that could some extent prevent misunderstanding and a conflict as well. And secondly, so when we follow the policy of strategic autonomy, so we could be able to cooperate on the global issues, or there are certain global issues per se. For example, terrorism is a global issue, poverty is a global issue, and recent rise in pandemics and threatening health of the global population, that is also a threat, and climate change and counter-terrorism, hunger, all these are threats. So therefore these are global challenges, and one country cannot do anything on its own. Rather, there is a need for the support from the multiple countries. But this policy of strategic autonomy actually provides an opportunity for India to engage with multiple countries on these global issues. So therefore there would be a better consensus, and there would be a better solution to deal with all these global issues. And remember that there are multiple global forums across the world, and therefore when we follow the policy of strategic autonomy, again it gives us an opportunity. It gives us a window of opportunity to engage, to participate in different multilateral platforms. For example, G7 is a grouping of industrialized and developed countries in the West. But India is very often invited to the G7 summit, and don't forget that India is a member country of both Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS also. So therefore, India can effectively and actively participate in multilateral forums across the world, such as United Nations, G20, BRICS, NAM and ASEAN. So therefore, it actually provides India more and more opportunities to collaborate with all major power centers. on these common issues that we have discussed, or these issues which have been plaguing the world, and that would foster the cooperation, and it would also reduces the isolationist tendencies. And don't forget that India is very often known as the leader of the global south. So we are not going into the camps of any one single country. Rather, we have been maintaining our independent foreign policy that is stands on the national interest of our country. So therefore, it inherently benefits India. And apart from that, strategic autonomy would also provides us an opportunity to engage with the new partners. So therefore, India can actually diversify and engage globally with diverse countries. So India can also establish strategic partnerships. So right. So a policy of dehyphenation, or strategic dehyphenation, so that India follows with both Israel and Palestine. So this strategic autonomy is very often closely linked with the policy of dehyphenation, strategic dehyphenation. So therefore, India can actually establish a partnership with countries like France, Central Asian republics, and different other countries across the world. So thereby, the essence of strategic autonomy is that our foreign policy should be based on India's core national interests, and India would not be allied with any country against any other country. India would not be part of military alliances. So it is essentially an independent existence of India. So that's very, very important, right? So for a country, especially for a country like India, so it should not go into the camps. Rather, it should have its own and independent foreign policy. But when we talk about the challenges, there are multiple challenges for India's strategic autonomy. One such challenge is that now there are multiple centers of power emerging. For example, China and Russia, and even US and European centers of power, and Japan. So it would be very difficult, because it would create very often a complex geopolitical landscape. So when it has been creating a complex geopolitical landscape, it would become very difficult for India to engage with all these multiple centers of power. So therefore, it requires a very careful geopolitical navigation of India through the complex geopolitical landscape. That is one challenge. And in recent times, India is very often seen as going or tilting towards the US, because India is a developing and India is an emerging economy. So India requires technology, India requires investment, and India also requires the climate finance. So there are multiple reasons that India has been maintaining very close and friendly ties with the US, and therefore it would send wrong signals to countries like Russia. And at this point of time, it is very important that we need to navigate this complex geopolitical landscape, particularly in the context of growing centers of power across the world. So however, so India should further strengthen its policy of strategic autonomy, and India should also evolve a particular view about different international issues, rather than taking a middle path. So it would also be advised for India, because that is a characteristic of any major growing power, that it should take a clear stand on one particular issue. So that is very, very important. So over a period of time, when India grows, India economically, militarily, technologically becoming strong, it is very important that India should take a clear stand on different global issues, because that's where India could gain its place, and India could gain actual place at the global stage and global platforms. And the policy of strategic autonomy would also help India secure its right place at the United Nations Security Council, that India has been very often demanding, right? So that's how you can conclude this answer. And now we'll move into the articles that we have been discussing. So the first important article is with respect to the plastic waste management. Recently, the Central Pollution Control Board had taken some decisions with respect to the plastic waste trading scheme, and we'll understand what exactly is this plastic waste trading scheme and what are the various the measures that India has taken so far to manage plastic waste. So we all knew the concerns with respect to the plastic waste. So because every year thousands of tons of plastic waste is being released into the environment, and because of this plastic waste it has been causing a lot of environmental degradation. So it results in environmental degradation. So we'll understand that. So the context is that recently, a Central Pollution Control Board has actually initiated a nationwide audit of around 800 recyclers of plastic waste across the country. So auditing is very, very important for every institution, every agency. So in order to understand how transparent, how accountable it is. So auditing actually helps bringing up the loopholes in one particular institution or an agency. So therefore there are number of recyclers of plastic waste, and Central Pollution Control Board has initiated the auditing of around 800 recyclers of plastic waste. So this was decided following the revelation in recent times that there are 4 different firms in different states like Gujarat, Maharashtra and Karnataka. They issued around 6 lakh bogus certificates under the extended producer responsibility scheme. So we'll understand what exactly is this extended producer responsibility scheme. Now under this extended producer responsibility scheme, so whoever producing plastic, whoever involved in manufacturing, production and sale of plastic, so they have certain responsibility with respect to the collection of plastic and at the same time recycling the plastic, so that it would not result in the degradation of environment due to the excess plastic pollution. So we will understand briefly the overview of plastic waste in India. What is the exact scenario of plastic waste in India? So we all knew that plastic waste is indiscriminately released into the environment, right? So a higher degree of plastic waste is being released into the environment every year. So therefore when we talk about the plastic waste, the single-use plastic has the highest proportion of this total plastic pollution, and it has been becoming an environmental hazard over a period of time. So therefore in response to one of the question in the parliament, a minister of environment, forests and climate change gave an answer in the parliament. In this answer, environment minister has said that more than 34 lakh tons of plastic garbage were generated in 2019-20. So this was the data of 2019 and 20. So 34 lakh tons of plastic garbage released into the environment. So therefore now we are in 2024. You can imagine that it would be around 50 to 60% increase in the total plastic waste generation into the environment. So therefore this has been indicating that last 5 years India's plastic garbage creation has more than doubled, with an average rise of 21.8% per annum. So there is a 21.8% increase in the plastic waste every year, and this is a very, very significant concern, because it would result in environmental degradation, negative impact on the environment and even the biodiversity also. So in fact, in order to solve this growing menace of plastic pollution and also encourage scientific management of this plastic waste or the plastic pollution, government has already notified the plastic waste management rules in 2016, and again it was amended in 2018, and it was again amended in 2021 as well, right? So we need to talk about the scientific management of plastic waste in India. So how plastic waste is scientifically managed in India. So as I have already told you that India, for the scientific management of the plastic waste management rules 2016 were released. Okay, so these particular rules have been mandating that the plastic waste generators, so whoever engaged in generation of plastic waste, producing plastic waste. So these rules mandated that they must take steps to reduce the plastic waste, and they should also ensure a segregated storage at the source of this plastic production, and it should also give it over to the local bodies or other agencies, right? So this is what the plastic waste management rules of 2016 have been emphasizing on, with several objectives. Now what kind of an objectives it actually has? Now when we talk about the objectives of this plastic waste management rules of 2016, so it wanted to raise the minimum thickness of the plastic carry bags to 40 to 50 microns. Okay, so now what was the rationale to increase the thickness of these carry bags from 40 to 50 microns? In order to make sure that these carry bags can be better handled, or it can be better collected when it comes to recycling of these plastic bags. So this is essentially for the better collection and recycling of the plastic waste. So the thickness of these plastic bags would be increased from 40 to 50 microns. And in fact, the plastic waste management rules 2016 also mandated that minimum thickness of these plastic bags would be 50 microns for plastic sheets in order to assist the collection and recycling of the plastic waste. And apart from that, so it would also expand the jurisdiction. Now what is that jurisdiction actually means? Now earlier, the plastic waste management rules or plastic waste or scientific management of plastic waste would be applicable only to the urban areas, but in recent times the plastic has also penetrated into the rural areas. Rural masses also started using plastic, so therefore it is felt that we need to extend the jurisdiction of this plastic waste management rules 2016 to rural areas as well, for the better collection and recycling of the plastic waste. And apart from that, it also brought in a lot of responsibilities for the plastic waste producers and generators. So it essentially deals with the responsibilities of plastic waste generators and producer. Now what exactly is this extended producer responsibility that we have discussed with respect to the plastic waste? Now extended producer responsibility has come up with a certain responsibilities for whoever engaged in plastic production, plastic sale, plastic distribution, import of plastic, so that all the plastic waste would be collected and recycled in an environmentally safe manner, and that would not result in the degradation of environment because of the plastic waste. So under this, producers, importers, and even the brand owners of the plastic waste, so they were made responsible for collecting waste that is being generated by their products. So whatever product that they have produced, so those products also generate waste. So therefore, the producers, importers, and brand owners have been made responsible for collecting the waste so that is being generated by their products. And in fact, the producers will also engage, or producers or those engaged in the manufacture of the plastic, import of carry bags from other countries, and multi-layer packaging of these plastic, and sheets, and those using these for packaging, wrapping their products. So everyone will be covered under the extended producer responsibility by the government for the better management, better collection, and better recycling of the plastic waste. So these rules also mandate that they must engage with the local governments to develop a plan or a system for the plastic waste management, right? So there should be a proper system in place for the management of the plastic waste, and within a specific time frame that is being specified. So we have also already discussed that the plastic waste management rules 2016 have mandated the extended producer responsibility, and it was again amended in the year 2018, the plastic waste management amendment rules 2018. So the amended rules of the plastic waste are now even applicable for the multi-layered plastic also. And in fact, it also mandates the plastic waste Management Amendment Rules of 2018 also mandates phasing out of this multi-layered plastic over a period of time, so which are non-recyclable. Very often this multi-layered plastic is non-recyclable and we cannot recover energy, any form of energy from the multi-layered packaging. Okay, so a multi-layered plastic, or there is no alternative use also. So these are the certain norms which are prescribed under the extended producer responsibility, and you can also go through the harmful effects of the plastic bags on the environment and even the human health also. And again, the plastic waste management rules were amended in the year 2021, and the plastic waste management rules 2021, they prohibit the identified single-use plastics. Okay, so there are single-use plastics and these single-use plastic would be prohibited under the plastic waste management rules of 2021, and these plastic waste management rules have a low utility and high littering potential by 2022. So now understand, the single-use plastic will be prohibited or eliminated by 2022, right? So ban on single-use plastic on August 12, 2021. A ban on identified single-use plastic, for example straws are known as single-use plastic, the thin polythene covers, so they can be used only one single time, so those plastics are known as single-use plastics. So on August 12, 2021, a ban on identified single-use plastic items was notified by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and the Plastic Waste Management and Amendment Rules of 2021, and it finally came into force on July 1st, 2022. Right, so by this the single-use plastic is actually banned, right? So you can also understand some efforts for the plastic free society, so you can go through it as well. So next article that we are going to discuss here is about the Global Gender Gap 2024 report, right? So it is essentially talking about the existing gender gap in education. Specifically, a gender gap in education would be understood by the World Economic Forum 2024 Global Gender Gap Report. So this Global Gender Gap Report is released by the World Economic Forum 2024 in 2024. So this particular report on global gender gaps have actually highlighted a significant disparities in education. Significant disparities in education, especially in India, and that can be highlighted from India's ranking. So India ranked poorly, so 129th out of 146 countries, and this is partly due to the decline in the educational attainment indicators that India aimed to achieve over a period of time. And in fact, when we say that India's rank is 129th out of 146 countries, it is a poor ranking on the part of India, and this also indicates on the gender gap indicators India has not been performing well. So therefore it is important that we must look into it. Now, what are the key findings and the statistics that are being provided by the Global Gender Gap Report of the World Economic Forum with respect to the educational attainment? Right. So first and foremost, we need to talk about the enrollment. When we talk about the education, it is important that we need to consider the enrollment. We need to consider the literacy rates. As of now, there is a very high enrollment rates for the women in primary education, secondary education and tertiary education. There is no doubt about that. Women have been actively involving or taking part in the education at different levels. However, the literacy rate gap between men and women stands at 17.2 percentage points. So there is no gender parity, there is no gender equality when it comes to the education. Rather, still women behind with respect to the education or enrollment or even the literacy rates, and this has to be considered. And when we talk about the higher education, the gross enrollment ratio for women in higher education is 28.5%. And the one thing that we need to appreciate here is that women gross enrollment ratio in higher education is higher than the male gross enrollment ratio in the higher education. So male enrollment ratio is just 28.3%, but it is slightly higher for the woman, 28.5%. And in fact, the female enrollment has increased by 32% in the last 10 years. The female enrollment ratio in the higher education has substantially increased, and in fact that is a good news. Increasing a female enrollment ratio in the higher education is absolutely a good news without any doubt. So however, we need to talk about the gender gap index parameters. So there are a number of gender gap index parameters, for example, economic participation of women, and the opportunities are there for women in the economy, and educational attainment status of women, health and survival of women, and political empowerment of women. So all these things are part of the World Economic Forum's global gender gap report, global gender gap index parameters. Okay, now, so what are the factors which have been influencing women's literacy rates, women's enrollment in higher education? So we need to look into it. This is very important, right? So infrastructure development, recent progress in infrastructure development is one factor which positively influenced women's participation in the higher education, or increased women enrollment in the higher education. For example, the government has been building schools, especially since the mid 90s, and it has substantially increased girls' educational enrollment, or enrollment of a female in schools, because increased infrastructure facilities. However, when we talk about the women's increased enrollment in schools, primary, secondary, tertiary, and even higher education, so there are a lot of regional disparities. These regional disparities still prevalent. So regional disparities in the sense that, for example, poor states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, in those states, women's participation or women's enrollment ratio in primary, secondary, tertiary, and higher education is still less compared to the developed states such as Kerala, Maharashtra, and Gujarat, Tamil Nadu. So therefore, these regional disparities still persist. So some states are lagging behind in secondary education and necessary and relevant infrastructure. So other thing which encouraged or positively influenced higher women enrollment is female teachers. The presence of women teachers positively impacts girls' enrollment, and apart from that, schools with only male teachers actually face a lower enrollment of girls due to the parental concerns. Parents have concerns about the girl child, and if there are schools which have higher male teacher population, parents generally not encouraged to send their girl child to the schools or colleges. So after that, transportation and sanitation is another area which also resulted in increasing women's participation, right? So free transportation provided by number of state governments, and certain incentives or incentives in the public transportation provided by the state governments, and even some state governments also providing bicycles for the girl child who are attending schools regularly, and that is also a positive factor which has influenced the enrollment ratio of girl child. However, there is an inadequate sanitation facilities, particularly menstruating girls. It also remain a barrier. So this is one barrier, and there is a need to enhance the infrastructure facilities in schools and colleges. However, it is not free from the challenges. There are a number of challenges also. When we talk about the challenges that still remain, higher education and college education. Now, some states have actually reported the higher enrollment of woman or girl child in the higher education. However, the concerns are there with respect to increasing dropout rate for the male students or boys. So therefore, we should ensure the gender parity, whether it is women or men. We must look into the gender parity, and that is very important with respect to total learning outcomes, or improving learning outcomes, or producing skilled students. So that is very important. So after that, science, technology, engineering and medicine, so this is also known as STEM field, and you can go through the data of women in the STEM field. In fact, so India is performing better in the number of female graduates from this STEM field at the tertiary level. So you can see all the countries. So when you compare with all these countries, women in India have engaged in a higher proportion in in the STEM fields. So women make up only 42.5% of the students in STEM fields, and that has been highlighting the need for a targeted encouragement. So we need to further encourage women to be part of the higher education. So after that, when we talk about the adult literacy, so far the data we have with respect to the adult literacy is only 2011 census data. So this particular data has also revealing that there is a significant gender gap in the adult literacy. Okay, so there is a lot of gender gap in the adult literacy. So with only 64.63% of women being literate compared to 80.88% of the men, and therefore we must bridge this particular gender gap, and that is very, very important here. And the other thing we need to talk about is recommendations. So what are the recommendations and what are the solutions, suggestions we need to take into consideration when we talk about increasing the enrollment and increasing the literacy rate for women. So first and foremost, we need to target the improving school infrastructure, improvement in the school infrastructure such as school buildings, toilet facilities, and sanitation, toilet facilities, and boundary walls for the schools, and sports grounds for the schools. So all these things have to be looked into when we wanted to improve the enrollment rate, and at the same time the literacy rate as well. The other thing is that schools and colleges should not be too far, and that also of one factor which actually disincentivizes parents and at the same time students to attend the schools and colleges. So therefore it would be better that we need to select an ideal location, and we should set up the schools and colleges in that particular ideal location, and we should also increase the female teacher presence as well. So this is very important, because earlier we have discussed that when there are schools with male teachers, generally parents have concerns, and therefore parents are not ready to send their the girl child to schools and colleges. So therefore it is also very important that we need to increase the female teacher presence in schools and colleges. That would enhance the participation and enrollment rate of girl child. So after that, we should also focus on sanitation facilities. So sanitation facilities including drinking water, toilet facilities, boundary walls. So all these facilities are very, very important in schools. So that would further encourage women's participation in the schools. And next important article, that budget session of the parliament begins tomorrow, right? So it is very important that the full term budget is going to be introduced by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, and everyone eagerly looking into the budget proposals. So the other thing is that this is the third time that Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government has been introducing budget. I mean, not third time. So this is the first time in the third term of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi introducing this particular budget. So budget session of the parliament will begin tomorrow. It actually begins tomorrow, and Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, of course, she would present economic survey in the parliament tomorrow, and the economic survey actually provides statistical information and analysis on various factors or various sectors of the Indian economy, and it also provides data on employment, inflation rate, growth rate, and GDP. And therefore, Finance Minister will present Union Budget 24-25 in Lok Sabha Tuesday, right? So it will start from Monday, and Nirmala Sitharaman will present the budget 24-25 on Tuesday. So government would likely to introduce 6 new bills in this particular budget session of the parliament. So these 6 new bills include a disaster management amendment bill will be introduced, and then boilers bill will also be introduced, and Bharatiya Vayuyan Videyak bill. So this is an aircraft act. Okay, so this is aircraft act, and that will also be introduced. And coffee promotion and development bill will be introduced, and the rubber promotion and development. So all these bills will be introduced in the parliament in this budget session. So it is actually expected that the government will introduce these bills in the parliament. So how and when parliament is actually convened, so we will understand a few aspects with respect to how and when parliament is actually convened. The power to convene a parliamentary session actually rests with the government. So it is based on the government when to convene a parliamentary session. In fact, that particular decision will be taken by the Cabinet Committee on the Economic Affairs, so which currently comprises of 9 ministers, including Defense Minister, Home Minister, Finance Minister, and the Law Minister. So the decision of the committee is formalized by the President, in whose name MPs are summoned to meet for a session. Okay, so how many parliamentary sessions actually convened or actually held every year? So when we talk about the parliamentary sessions in India, there is no such a fixed calendar for India for the parliamentary session. So there is no such fixed parliamentary calendar, but there are some constitutional provisions in the constitution with respect to the number of sessions to be held. We will discuss that later. So however, by convention, parliament actually meets 3 sessions in a year. So it is a convention, but it is not mentioned in the constitution, but it is just a convention. You just remember this. So based on the convention, parliament actually meets 3 sessions in a year. So one was budget session, and second was monsoon session, and third was winter session. Okay, so budget session actually starts towards the end of January, and it would be concluded by the end of April or first week of May. So however, one doubt that budget session generally starts at the end of January and it completes by April. But why budget session actually starts from tomorrow? It is almost July. So this is because the government is newly elected. So the government is newly elected, and newly elected government has been introducing this budget, and because of that reason, so this budget session was not held during January and April. So second session is monsoon session. It usually begins in July and it finishes in August. And winter session, it begins in November to December. So 3 parliamentary sessions would be actually held. Now what are the constitutional provisions with respect to the parliamentary sessions? So when we talk about the parliamentary sessions, Article 85 of the Indian Constitution deals with the parliamentary sessions. So that is with respect to summoning of parliament, is that specified in Article 85 of the Indian Constitution. So in fact, like many other articles, so this Article 85 of the Indian Constitution also traced back to the Government of India Act 1935. In fact, Indian Constitution was inspired or influenced a lot from the Government of India Act. A lot of provisions in the Government of India Act 1935 were added in the present day Indian Constitution. So therefore Article 85 also traced back to the Government of India Act 1935. Now we'll talk about summoning of Parliament. The summoning of the process of calling all members of the Parliament to meet. So that is known as summoning, calling all members of the Parliament for the meeting. And in fact, who have the power to summon the Parliament? The President actually summons each house of the Parliament from time to time. So from time to time, President summons each house of the Parliament. So, and apart from that, one thing that we need to understand, the gap between 2 sessions of the Parliament, the gap should not exceed 6 months. So that actually means the Parliament meets at least 2 times in one single year. So Parliament must meet at least 2 times in one single year, but by convention, Parliament generally meets 3 times a year. Okay, but it is mandated that the gap between 2 parliamentary sessions should not be more than 6 months, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.